fleeing their homes, especially in neighboring Poland. We are joined now via Zoom by Marta Prochwicz-Jazowska, who is a program coordinator at the German Marshall Fund of the United States of America. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. Perhaps let's just first start with what your organization does.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. We are a transatlantic think tank. We have offices in 7 different locations. And our prime goal is to influence policy and to strengthen the transatlantic alliance. So it's particularly important in the face of what's happening right now in Ukraine that Europe and the United States coordinate.
Okay, so we'll get to the policy aspect of it in just a bit, but just tell us about the current situation on the ground. Do we have any figures of the number of displaced, and what exactly happens, what awaits them at the end of their travels?
That's right. We do have numbers for today and for yesterday. So normally there's a very big traffic wave on a daily basis between Ukraine and Poland. It's about 30,000 people. And for now, we know that 15,000 people have arrived to Poland. And like you mentioned before, Moldova is also another destination where they are arriving. So in the tens of thousands. And of course, it's very hard to predict how this number will go up. It will certainly go up, but that definitely depends on not only on what Putin's actual plan is for Ukraine and how much of the territory he is going to occupy, but also on how Ukrainians hold up. And whether this will be a long fight or a different one. And another aspect is whether people will be able to go back to their country in the aftermath of the war, what the political and military and economic, mostly, situation in Ukraine will be.
And as you say, nobody really knows how long the situation will continue for. There are reports that Poland has already issued around 300,000 temporary residence visas to Ukrainians in recent years. So what would be in the workings for now? And would those that have been issued expired? What is the solution that is anticipated?
Well, first of all, so Poland has created relocation centers at the border. That's one of the steps. And arriving at a relocation center, the refugees are taken in and they are given primary care, psychological care, and then they are relocated within the country. Now, we already have a very large population of Ukrainian migrants. However, it is quite a different population because these people often travel back to Ukraine. And the situation will certainly change when the country is no longer a place where they can go back to. So the nature of migration in Poland will be completely different, and the country will need to adapt to how it accepts migrants and what kind of status they can be granted. And it's at this stage, it doesn't have as much experience as it should in having a very solid and long-term migration policy. It does have a lot of experience in accepting Ukrainians and having a lot of Ukrainians in Poland. However, this will be and has already started to be completely different.
And I was going to point to that, Poland's position on accepting migrants, just looking at recent years and those who have tried to get some sort of temporary asylum or refugee status in Poland. I'd imagine, no doubt, this is because this is a close neighbor. So talk to us about what your organization does. You mentioned that you are in it also to influence policy that would no doubt have within its purview the current conflict. What advice is there from your organization on how to overcome the current tensions?
Well, first of all, going back to what you mentioned about Poland's migration history and in accepting migrants, I think it's important to make the point about this. So yes, it's not a glorious past since 2015. In 2015, Poland's policy towards accepting migrants was different than in other countries in Europe. But we could say that that was linked to a political game that was going on, and migrants started to be used as a threat, portrayed as a threat in order to consolidate electorate. Then there was the also very recent migration crisis with the Belarusian border, where there was pushback as well. And I think it's worthwhile to mention that this was a completely different type of crisis. It was a human crisis and a humanitarian crisis, and Poland violated laws in that crisis. But it was part of a bigger game that was going on. It was a step against Lukashenko because the people coming to that border were forced to go there. They were flown in from different countries. And right now, the attitudes are completely different towards the migrants that the refugees that could arrive in this current after the invasion of Russia on Ukraine. And so GMF is working across all sectors. And right now at the Warsaw office where I'm based, we're on this issue in particular, we are talking to migration experts. We're trying to get a hold of civil society experts and bring together these people, think about bringing together the government and the civil society and the humanitarian organizations to one table to talk, because there is a very vibrant civil society and humanitarian organizations that are willing to help, and they need to be sitting down at the table. We're also in contact with different international agencies, Frontex, the European Agency for Asylum, who also have to have a part in consultations with Poland, because Poland will not only be a country of destination, of transit, it will be a country of destination and transit. So there needs to be an EU mobilization on different levels to think about relocation.
And just because we are struggling to get information on certain aspects of what is actually occurring, because there are two sides to these conflicts who obviously portray their own side of what is going on. What is happening with regards to the eastern parts? Russia is saying that they are welcoming people fleeing from Donetsk and Lugansk. Do you have any idea of that, and what happens to those people with regards to the safety of those who are caught in the middle? Because there has been reports of widespread shelling in those areas, as well as we are hearing reports of shelling in the Ukraine as well. I mean, in Kiev.
Well, speaking to that's also something that GMF follows. We have a platform that follows disinformation, and I believe that maybe not this in particular, but there is a lot of disinformation going on around this crisis, and it's very difficult to find reliable sources at this point in order to find out what is exactly going on the ground. But regarding displaced people within Ukraine, one of the aspects that we have to be mindful of is that right now, the issue is not just about accepting the refugees. That's not our primary problem. That's not the issue at hand, accepting them in Poland. The issue is actually providing the logistics for these people to move within the country, to move within Ukraine, to move to different parts. That is a great concern. And something that we should be thinking about.
Yeah, but within a conflict situation, that ought to be very difficult, especially if you go by some accusations. We know Russia at first had said that it's sending peacekeeping forces, and it later went on to say that it is defending the civilians of the sovereign states that it's mentioned. But then from the Ukrainian side, we hear that there has been widespread attacks on Ukrainian civilians. So how do you facilitate that within that kind of environment?
Well, I think we've, here in the West, and especially in Poland, given our history with Russia, we've grown accustomed to the type of propaganda that Vladimir Putin's regime sends out. And any sorts of information such as peacekeeping operations, so-called peacekeeping operations, or giving out passports, little green men, we've heard it all before. This is not the first crisis that we're dealing with Russia, not just as Poland, but as the international community. The first one was in recent history, 2008 in the Russo-Georgian War, and then we had Donbass and the annexation of Crimea in 2015. So these are scenarios, these are things that he's done every time. The playbook is very standard. It's always the same excuse. So for us here, it's not difficult to discern what the truth is and what isn't. Russia invaded Ukraine, and these are not peacekeeping forces. This is the Russian army invading Ukraine and attacking in an unprovoked way, attacking the Ukrainians.
All right, thank you so much for your time speaking to us about the migrant situation, particularly in Poland. Marta Prochwicz-Jazowska, who is a program coordinator at the German Marshall Fund of the United States of America. And of course, we will follow up on what is happening at the UN Security Council. We'll speak to my colleague Sharon Bryce Peace and hopefully also speak to our colleague Nick Harper. There is still a lot of talk around whether or not US President Joe Biden will take the bait, as it were, impose harsher sanctions on Russia, particularly Russian President Vladimir Putin. There have been calls that there must be sanctions imposed